Hey everybody, Taylor White Moffitt here of Humanity Shared, and I'm with my friend Kevin Reichland, and we're hoping to give you, as Click and Clack would say, a perfectly wasted hour of fabulous information and wisdom and laughter and experience.
Right on. Hey everyone, Kevin Reichland here. I'm Taylor's friend, and oh my gosh, I can't wait to see where Taylor and I go today. The whole reason we decided to do this was because I have met Taylor a few times for coffee, and what a gas. We just go everywhere. I playfully have said once or twice, we explore a lot of things and solve nothing.
That's so true. And I think one of the richest things that we experience that we really want to offer other people a chance to experience is to keep opening to this growth mindset of we all know what we know. For example, you know that your ears are working if you can hear this podcast, and I know my voice is working because I can hear my voice. We know what we don't know. We know Kevin and I are not going to go do brain surgery tonight because we know we don't know how to do that. But the thing I think you and I have the most fun talking about and learn so much from both each other and even ourselves is what we don't know that we don't know. And that's often where we end up. And so I think that's what we hope to give people in this time together is a chance to learn and ask a lot of questions and stir some curiosity in them about perhaps what they don't know that they don't know.
Totally. You know, I've always thought if I ever write another book, I've got several titles in my head. One of them is Addicted to Right. Not right wing, but wow, we are so many people in our culture are caught up in I gotta be right. And I don't feel that need. I do need to be right in my work. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, when a patient comes to me and they have X, Y, or Z, I do need to make the right diagnosis and all that bit. But those blinders that people have on about it's this way, it's the only way, it's so limiting. And so I love about our conversations is we just don't have blinders on. It's like anything you and I have ever spoken about, I know I always walk away and go, I hadn't thought of that.
You know? I usually think, wow, I'm wrong about so many things, or I know so much less than I thought I did. But you're bringing up an awesome place for us to start that I think we should jump into, which is, why is it that we're wired to want to be right? And I notice so many people in humanity, whether it's in their professional lives or in their personal relationships, or even just when you ask someone which location, which block is that restaurant on, they are so committed to being right. I have a theory, and I can't wait to hear yours. My theory is that love and belonging, I believe, is the number one social, psychological, emotional need we have. And it's stacked right up there after food, shelter, and hydration. And that love and belonging is something we're so wired for. We're social creatures wired to connect. And yet that connection is the very source of pain and suffering for almost all of us. And so being right is often, or was often, a way to fit in, which we can confuse for being right. So if I got the answer right in math class, or I got the game right with my friends, I could get this sense of being liked or valued or appreciated, and I could fit in. Now, to me, that's actually the opposite of belonging, because belonging means I can show up like I did today, fresh from a hike, not sure what we're going to talk about, and still feel like I have a place with you. Mm-hmm. But fitting in is what so many of us were wired for. And so I believe that drive to get it right is avoiding so much of the shame that we put upon ourselves or others put upon us for being wrong, as well as how many strokes we give people for knowing. What do you think?
The first place I go to with that is if one of our deepest desires or wants is belonging, I mean, having to be right, it pushes you away from belonging. You know what I mean? Now I get what I also kind of heard was, you know, people are looking for their tribe or whatever the right terminology is. And so if you and I look at that painting and you love it and I hate it, then we disagree. And you think you're right, and we're, you know, in our opinions, and now, so I guess we'll never get along because you think that's gorgeous and I think it's ugly. I don't think it's ugly. It's not my thing, quite honestly. But
yeah,
but you know what I mean. And so that's interesting. Love, I agree with you about belonging and love. I'm just trying to figure out where where being right comes in with that. I think being right also really allows a sense of security.
Well, that's where I think it's conflated, right? Because security is an illusion. Love is an illusion.
True.
But in our family, we watched this incredible movie last night, and I think it was called like The Iron Claw, and it was about the Von Erich family that had 5 boys. True story, and they were all in wrestling.
Oh, wrestling. I didn't see this.
Yeah, and what was fascinating was the dad was super clear to feel love from him, to get any sense of belonging for him, which is, again, really fitting in. You were going to be a certain way. You were going to perform a certain way. You were going to participate a certain way. You were going to say certain things. You were not going to cry. You were not going to complain. And I think that set of rules that we get from our family of origin, and then we get from our synagogue or church and our sports team and our school and so forth, is this sense of that there's a right or wrong way to be part of a tribe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you're not right, you're wrong.
Exactly.
And if you're wrong, you don't fit.
And yet one of the things I think we've always appreciated about each other from the moment we met is I love when we find a place where one of us is wrong, because there's this huge aha and growth opportunity and a new way to see it. And yet culturally, that doesn't really line up with a lot of how the world organizes itself and a lot of the feedback we give humans. I look at the corporate and organizational structure in the world, and so many places where there is a right way and a wrong way, and you better get clear which side of the fence you're on.
I don't know if you've experienced this in your marriage, but in my marriage to my wonderful wife, Amy, I've had to learn to back off having to be right. Even if, you very early on said, the restaurant is right there. She and I were just in the car this morning driving to Blake's graduation. She says, it's at such and such a place. I said, no, it's at a different place. One of us needs to be right because we need to get there, but we have had to learn to back off that need, that it's almost competitive. Yeah. It's almost competitive. Well, no, it's not almost. It's competitive. Well, almost, right?
And you're talking about this great dynamic in relationships where, as someone who's worked with couples for 30 years, one of the tenets I tell them the very first time they come in before they decide if they want to work with me is you're going to have to be more invested in being connected than being right. Because when the threat comes up and the musical chair's music starts to play, if only one of you gets the last seat, then the relationship loses. And sometimes our ego can feel super strong, and I can say to Brian, take a right on Pine, and he'll say, no, it's Spruce. And I can go, fine, whatever. But sometimes, man, I just decide I want to argue down like, no, it's Pine Street. And in that moment, I wish I could just have this pause, or someone could just tap me on the shoulder and say, does it really matter? You're still going to probably get there. It's going to be okay. But this old wrestling we have to be right and to know the best way, the fastest way, the shortcut, all the things. Because I think, at least for me, growing up in New England, so much of my socialization and my check marks and my strokes came from being right. And I have spent a lifetime unlearning that because I find being right so boring and uninteresting.
And separating.
Yeah.
So, you start out about love and belonging. Where I went to brain neuroscience. And from the time we're infants, we have to be right. It's wrong to stick your finger in an electric socket. It's right to ask your parents for food. It's wrong to not look both ways before you cross the street. It's right to look both ways before you street. I mean, I'm just being quickly. And I think that need to be right is very, very tied into survival. And so but we're no longer kids. That's the whole thing. I've been saying this recently. It's come up in the office, how children have so much neuroplastic potential. I mean, they can create synapses and break synapses. I'm terrible at numbers, but thousands and thousands a day, right? And we adults have less neuroplastic potential. Why? I've actually looked around. I can't find anybody because I think it would be theory. So my current theory is we don't need it if we know how to think. I'm no longer in survival mode. You know what I mean? I'm in awareness mode. And so the same thing with right. I think I needed to be right when I was a kid. I wouldn't have gotten through school if I wasn't right, if I hadn't put the right answers and all that. But now it's awareness. And that's a very different thing than being right. My awareness is, or your awareness is, you'll get where you're going if Brian doesn't make the right turn. So then with awareness, I think the cool thing is trying to find that balance of this is a good time for me to be right. And this is a time where it really doesn't matter.
100%. And I think where we get log jammed, or we see other humans get log jammed, is ego. Because what the ego goes back to is early on, that neuroplasticity, the tracks laid down for me where there's a threat to relationship if you can't get this right. If you can't behave a certain way, perform a certain way, say these things, don't say these things. And so when I see people acting in ways I would say I don't prefer, what I usually try to say to myself is, oh, I think that's ego. And they feel threatened. Because to your point, I think being right or wrong is so survivalistic, and how many people in current day with more resources and affluence than we've ever had in the world are people acting more protective, vigilant, volatile even to really get it right and make sure others are in this box and they're in this box and that there's a right and a wrong. And we're in the political structure, which, oh Lord, here we go in the podcast to politics. We'll keep this brief, right? Of that most people are sitting on the side of there's a right side and a wrong side. And to go back to what I heard you saying and what we talk about so often is as soon as we judge something, and right or wrong is just a judgment in a lot of moments, right? As soon as we judge it, it's over. Like clients will often say to me like, oh, I know I had that stupid thought or I did that stupid thing. I'm like, no. Let's just say like you did that thing. Because as soon as we judge it, we shut it down, we've categorized it and we put it away. And we do that with people, and we do that with politics, and we do that with thoughts and behaviors. But what we're talking about now is this curiosity leading to awareness of what if I just actually paid attention rather than commented on everything, which gets me excited to talk about mindfulness.
Talk about mindfulness.
Well, I think this is probably the number one reason I feel it's imperative that if people want to feel well in their nervous system and their daily life, that some sort of mindfulness practice is so key, because it's just what we're circling to, which is when my brain gets caught up in playing ping pong with figuring out and naming and judging and putting in boxes and categorizing, I'm missing this really great experience of being, of noticing, and of having a little bit of depth perception to what's actually happening in front of me, rather than being caught in a morass of seaweed and story and drama and old history and lost in this myopic tunnel I've carved myself out to. So I think that mindfulness is one of the ways we work with softening our need to be right, softening this drive we have to just box things in and figure it out, including ourselves and other people.
Isn't so much, my experience, so much of mindfulness is summed up in the word pause. Gosh, right?
Yeah, everybody at home, take a breath in and a breath out.
Isn't it remarkable how easy it is to pause and how little we do it?
Well, most of the things in life that are brilliant are free, don't take a ton of time or a lot of brain power. And yet I'm like, no, I'm just going to do this other thing instead, right? The only place I could really quickly argue with that is it takes time and effort to make really good food from the earth. However, most other things are, there's a lot of things to your point. Like the pause is one of the simplest, most profoundly impactful tools that gives you the perception, the time, the objectivity, the checking inward. Like there's so many things the pause offers. And again, at the speed of which our culture is currently moving at, we discourage the pause. Like you ever sit at a traffic light and you're not on your phone or anything, but man, if you're not already inching out when that red light's about to turn green, there's three people behind already beeping. And I'm like, I was on a flight home from Salt Lake City hiking in the desert with the boys last weekend, and there was this person just like elbowing me to get in front, and I was like, sure, go right ahead. And I'm thinking, we're not going to fly out of here until we're all on that very same plane. but the anxiety people report and the rushing people report. And so to your point, man, what if we just had like over the loudspeakers, we got little, the alerts you get on your phone when children are stolen. What if we used those alerts for something brilliant? Like, hey, everybody, let's just have a moment.
It's, so why don't we pause?
Because I have places to be and I'm self-important and I got to get places, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm not quite pulling it, but there's an intuitive connection between not pausing and needing to be right. I have to tease that out a little bit. Mm-hmm. But for me, just as I'm kind of teasing this out loud, the less I need to be right, the more I'm relaxed. And the more I'm relaxed, the more it's easy to pause.
Well, because a pause also says is an inherent trust. Like when I'm teaching mindfulness with people, a lot of the resistance I hear is like, I don't have time. I'm not going to get it right. I don't have the skill. It's not going to help me, right? There's not a trust in both self or that like slowing down would actually give us something. Because again, I think culturally, our culture is built on more is more. And so slowing down doesn't match up with that. And I look at when I go in and talk to corporations, and one of the biggest things we come up against right out of the gate in doing organizational workshops is people who are like, we got deliverables, we got deadlines, we need people to perform. And I say, here's the great irony. You're going to get there faster if everybody slows the F down.
Go slow to go fast.
That's right.
How often? In conversation, it's something I had to learn too, which was to slow down stop my need to have an immediate response to what you say. So it's been a learned thing for me. And I'm going to say only in the last decade, maybe 15 years since I heard it from somebody, said, I don't have to remember everything you say. I don't have to think, but I have like 5 different things I want to say. Wait. Just let it flow. And if it needs to come back, it'll come back. Pause. It's for me in my work, I'm so lucky that I can pause as much as I want with the patients. By the way, I'm trying to change that term. A friend of mine recently said, do you know the derivation of the word patience? And I said, well, you mean with a T? And I said, yeah. I said, no. He said, there's it's Latin or whatever. It means unwell one. And I'm like, I really don't want to call my people unwell. So I'm still working on that one. Folks, but also, I'm a doctor, and in our culture, they're called patients, but that doesn't mean I have to do what they say. But in my world of working with people that are called patients, I often pause. Now, not always with you, because you come in my office and we start like the second you walk in the door, one of us will ask the other, how are things? And we're off, so we don't necessarily, but we do occasionally, even so. But gosh, just with my patients to say, I'm not 100% sure what to do here. I have a bunch of ideas, but let's just chat for a moment while I kind of filter these things around. So they're kissing cousins that need to be right and need to know. Yeah. They're kind of at the same time. How can I possibly know exactly what to do in every moment? I can't.
And that pause is so freeing because it lets all of us exhale. It lets our nervous systems drop. And to your point, sometimes wisdom arises and then we can have a knowing of what's happening in us or for us or perhaps for others. But I think we also can have the freedom to say, I don't know. And that's okay too, right? Because I think the pace and the push and the urgency of so many things goes back to the being right, goes back to the need to know, to be the first one, and that life isn't a race unless you're in a hurry to die, which I'm not. I mean, I'm available for it whenever it happens. I hope it's quite a bit ways away, but I'm certainly not in a race.
Painless.
Yes. Painless, please. Quick and painless. I wouldn't mind if it was graceful too, but I'll take, just quick and painless would be painless. Good. Yeah. And I think that, one of the first things I teach people in the leadership training I run is that whether they're having a family meal or they're running a meeting or they're giving a talk to 10,000 people in an auditorium, starting everybody off with 5 breaths. We have yet to get feedback in 5 years that anyone has come back and said, well, that was a complete waste of my time and I didn't want that and I didn't need that. Most people went, oh my God, I didn't even realize I came in on 2 wheels. I haven't breathed all day. I haven't breathed for a week. And I find that breath is one of these fascinating things that most people, again, free and right under your nose, not even coming to a theater near you soon. It's already available in the neighborhood in which you live.
And you have to do it anyways.
That's right. It's already happening whether you're paying attention or not. Right. And yet, how often I'll say to someone who comes in my office, can you just pause for a moment? Do you notice you're not breathing? And they'll look at me and then they'll say, no. And then they'll come back a week later and say, oh my Lord, I'm so annoyed with you because all week I kept noticing I hold my breath. So we're back to holding our breath puts us in survival, right? Mm-hmm. It tells my nervous system, oh, things are not cool here. Therefore, if we were to take lab work, what we'd know is you're producing more cortisol. We could go through all the markers, but your blood work would show us, and holding your breath alone, you are hijacking your system and you are keeping yourself hostage in survival. So all of these things start to say, oh, this is how I'm building a life that's not sustainable. This is why I constantly want to escape my life, because in the simplest things I'm doing, like not pausing, running around, trying to be right, holding my breath, I am living hijacked in survival. And I'm wondering why I feel exhausted, unsatisfied, and irritated at best.
Completely agree. Completely agree. I was thinking as you were talking about people come to you. People come to me increasingly in my career now. They know that I'm not your average chiropractor or average doctor or whatever. I'm asking them to take agency, but I still get my share of folks who come in to see me, and they're under the paradigm of fix me. Mm. One of the early things I wrote in my book was if people could do with their bodies what they do with their cars, drop them off at the dealership, get a loaner, go shopping. If they could, they would. And so, the very first time I meet all my new folks, it's like, this isn't going to be your standard visit. So that's my world. And I'd say it's changing, but it's still mostly a new person who comes to see me is expecting that I'm going to do what every other doctor does. Fix them. They can go, they might as well be watching Netflix while I do the work, or a medication does the work, or a surgery, but there's just no effort. Would you say most people who come to you have that same mindset, or would you say there's a little more openness to, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I love that question or that observation. Yeah, I think ultimately a lot of people come in with an unconscious belief that they're broken and that I'm going to help them put them back together like Humpty Dumpty. And so I feel like there's, similarly to what you're saying, there's a mixed bag of response. There's this relief that they're not broken and a complete annoyance and frustration that I'm going to ask them to be equally responsible and part of this moving forward. And I think I liken it to all adulting's tired. It's like tiring, rather. It's tiring to go get groceries. It's tiring to do laundry. It's tiring to have hard conversations with your spouse. It's tiring to be an adult sometimes. And so to your point, I was thinking when you said that, there's a part of me that loves going to the gym. And I think the part of me that doesn't want to go, I don't think I would trade that in for what I get from it. So it's like, I don't want to miss doing the hard things because the hard things give me so much competence and confidence. We could get into, did you see Huberman and David Goggins had a podcast, and Huberman was like, I saved up this amazing neuroscience, new information I got to tell you, David, because you're the epitome of it. And there's a place in our brain called the mid-singular anterior cortex, and it grows and shrinks in response to difficult things. But here's the tricky part, he says. So I think he used the example of like an ice cold bath, which is really hot and hip right now with Wim Hof and all those things. And he said, when I first was doing ice baths, I was like, this is terrible and I can't stand it. And he said, and I learned that in that moment, my mid-singular anterior cortex is growing. And this is my place of grit and resilience to draw from. He said, but as soon as I started to grow tolerance for it, as soon as I started to be less annoyed by it and sort of embrace that, like, this is what's so, I'm going to do it, so I'm not going to kick up a big fuss about it. He said, my mid-singular anterior cortex starts to shrink. So that the ultimate difficulty is we must, for our entire life, do hard things that we don't want to do to keep that grit and resilience muscle strong. So to your point, there's definitely moments where if I could skip the gym, I would skip it. But the grit and resilience it gives me is something I draw on regularly. And so I guess if I could get that too, I would skip the gym. But I think if I'm going to keep my grit and resilience muscle, if we call it that, growing and strengthening, there is an emotional, psychological satisfaction I get. There's a sense of competence and confidence I get when I do hard things I don't want to do.
Well, several things. One, that's why when I work with athletes, it's a blessing and a curse. The blessing part is athletes know how to put in effort. If I want to go up a hill faster on my bike, I got to do intervals. I got to go out when it's ugly. I got to do all that. So they get the grit and perseverance part. But the drawback is, they also don't know when to stop, but that's another conversation. Something when you were talking about Huberman's, grit and perseverance, I wanted to try and tease apart. I don't have to do things that are, the question I asked myself as you were saying that was, does that mean I need to do hard things for the rest of my life, or, harder, or I mean, is it necessary to be that hard when you say grit and perseverance?
Yeah, well, now we're talking about a scale, right? Like, let's say 0 to 100. He didn't say to us, listen, you've got to be over 50% of I don't know. Like, is it
That's
just slightly uncomfortable?
Only he would know that. Yeah,
we're
right.
going to need to, Andrew Huberman, we're coming for you. We're going to need details on the mid-singular anterior cortex. But it's a great question, because I think one reason we do hard things is because life gives us hard things that we don't choose all the time. And if we don't have any practice or skill, you look at kids who have been helicopter parented or absolved of having to do hard things, and they get to college and they just blow out because they can't figure out how to do anything, right? That would be an example. But I also think, to your point, we live in Boulder, Colorado, where I've worked with a lot of athletes over the years. And sometimes I think, oh my Lord, like, you are putting this body to a test that just seems inordinate and unhealthy and not useful, right? We're way off the scale of doing hard things. And so how much difficulty do we need to grow that muscle, to grow that cortex, to feel as though I have something to draw from? Right. And maybe as we're saying it, it's like, we can only know for ourselves. Like, I know how hard I work at the gym, and I know that gives me this deposit in the bank, if you will. And I never reach for a withdrawal that I don't have it based on the work I'm doing. So for me, it feels like I've got enough grit. Universe, I'm not looking for a bigger test. Thank you.
I was just going to say, I don't go looking for it anymore. It seems to find me, but, and in this moment, I'm trying to think, when's the last time something hard found me? Hard for me, and it isn't just physical, riding a bike uphill. It can be physical, mental, or emotional. God, my latest hard was I applied to 2 chiropractic conventions to do a talk and on the work I do and all that bit. And I got turned down by both of them. And on the second one, after I got turned down, wow, I rarely go as dark as I went. This is worthless. I'm done. I quit. I'm just going to go back to being a chiropractor. Sorry, I'm not sure. I guess we're allowed to curse. What the hell, right? Fuck this whole mind, brain, body shit, emotions, rah. And Amy and I laugh about it. I'm usually I can shift my moods really fast. And I came home from a bike ride because I went out for a bike ride, and it was all self-doubt and like, all that bit. And I said to Amy, God, it took me like 45 minutes to shift that. And she always laughs and she goes, that's all 45 minutes and you shifted that much despair and darkness? I said, well, mostly, but I've done it before. And so that's the point. I think that's where I'd wonder about the scale. That's my most recent, came out of nowhere, and it was shitty for really a day, but a really hard hour before I could shift it. I've had experience shifting before. And because I've had experience shifting before, being willing to go through the hard stuff, now it's only 45 minutes. Maybe in 5 years from now, it'll be 30 minutes. or maybe it won't happen anymore. But I think I was playfully saying, I don't go looking for this stuff. It still finds me, no matter how awake, aware, everybody I know who's awake, aware, does the work, is conscious, shit finds them.
Because we're having a
human experience. Exactly.
Yeah,
I know.
Pain's part of the experience, right? That's a whole conversation we could have. Like like discomfort is a part of life. And I think that's the biggest part of our suffering is our rejection of the discomfort, our judgment of the discomfort, our dislike of the discomfort. And in that, I mean, I had the idea once that we should do a podcast on discomfort. And I was like, wow, that would never end. And that seems depressing. But the most awesome thing that's changed in my life is just what you're saying is what I call like catching it sooner, not spinning out as far, recovering quicker, and going longer in between. But to your question, I can't imagine there'll ever be a day where that'll stop. For example, I have 5 children, and if one of them died before me, I have this unspoken rule with the universe. Like, you've already taken some of my early pregnancies, like we're even, which is my own rule. Of course, the universe has not written anything up there. I'm not going to just be, apathetic or neutral about that. However, I also don't believe that my children belong to me or I deserve to have them here longer than I don't believe I have any rights more than any other human. So why not my kids to get leukemia, hit by a car, killed, whatever it may be. And I think that as long as we're human and we're willing to have attachments to people and to let ourselves love, our life has already been rendered an altar of loss, and it will continue to be. And every time you sign up to be in a friendship or any relationship, you are already setting yourself up to potentially losing that. That person decides they don't want to be friends with you anymore. Your lover decides they don't love you anymore. They die. And that's part of the deal. And yet we don't prefer that part of the deal. So we have a whole lot of reaction around it. So I feel like most of our suffering is in fact this place of either I'm not supposed to feel these things or I have a lot of bad feelings about discomfort.
Oh, for sure. And back to, that's the handy thing about being an athlete, at least one of them. I actually enjoy discomfort, physical.
You're crazy.
A little. It takes one to know one.
Yeah, you're crazy in a different way than I'm crazy. It's like, I don't know, man. There's certain times I'm lifting some really heavy shit where I'm like, okay, I kind of love this, but I usually don't love it till it's over.
I love that point. Talk about a meditation, because meditation is to try and empty your mind, and at least certain types of meditation. For me, going uphill on a bicycle, when it gets so hard that my entire world narrows down to 2 competing thoughts, and they're one's just slightly bigger than the other. The smaller one is stop, this hurts. The bigger one is no, keep going. But it's 49:51. And then what I really love, yes, I'm crazy, is when my body goes pop, and I can't override it. Yeah. That's just so fun, interesting, painful. It makes me go to another thing, which is I have so much compassion for people in chronic pain, because when I'm riding my bike uphill as hard as I can and it frickin' hurts and all that bit, at least I have the option to stop. Now I try to push it, and I have pushed it so hard that I don't stop. My body stops and I pop. And that's the one thing that when I think of all the folks I know with chronic pain, it's so hard. Back to hard, the choice.
It is.
But I'm just going to interrupt for a second. But they do have choice of how they're going to respond to it, because you were talking about suffering. If they know how to do it. And that's what you and I both do, is teach people that you can change your suffering. 100%. You might not be able to affect the pain. Your child may have passed away or had leukemia. On and on and on and on and on. Have I ever done this uber simplistic thing I do in my office? So this is pain. I'm pinching my arm. Ouch. Maybe I can do something about that. Maybe I can't. Suffering is, this sucks. Oh my God. And that's really, I've occasionally been accused of being overly simplistic, and I kindly go, no, I'm not. It's actually true. It's that simple.
Well, it is that simple. And what's also equally simple that causes us such difficulty is we have these monkey minds that are just meaning-making machines. And the second we feel something uncomfortable, the rock in the shoe, the pinch, the pain, this whatever it is, the mind goes 0 to 60, right? So what's one of the things like if somebody came in to see you and you were never going to see them again, because I like to think about that, like the first time, like if I never saw this person again, what's the Jenga piece I want to put in or pull out that would help their structure relieve itself or get more stable? What's one thing you feel like you offer people around pain and suffering and how to help them build a different relationship than most people typically have with it?
So every single person I ever see, I talk about how do we learn? Mm-hmm. And so there's 3 components to learning. First, you got to be exposed to it. See it, smell it, touch it, taste it, or hear it. And at least that's exteroception. Down the road, it's interoception if you think it enough or feel it enough. But because they're in my office for a physical problem being pain. So first thing you got to do when you learn, first factor is got to be exposed to it. Second is repetition. The more you're exposed to it, the more likely you are to learn it. And the third thing is importance. Mm-hmm. The more important you make it, the less repetition you need. The less important you make it, the more repetition you need. I always use the state capitals. What's the state capital of South Carolina?
Greenville.
Is it really?
No, it's Columbia. I went to college in Columbia. I don't know why I just said Greenville. Okay. It's Columbia. And only because I'm a Gamecock, I happen to go to college there.
Okay. Well, I always say, I'll pick a state that I don't know, like South Carolina. Yeah. And I'll go, you know why? Because I don't care.
Yeah.
But if you want to talk about the anterior cingulate cortex, where the changes occur and I know all about that. So I'll say, when it comes to pain, so pain occurs in the sense of touch, because you don't see pain or smell pain. It's happening a lot, and it's really important to you because it sucks. You just checked all the boxes for learning. Mm-hmm. And it always makes people pause. And what I hope every person takes away is they say, now, maybe you can do something about the exposure. Maybe you can or can't do something about the repetition, but how important you make it is up to you. Mm-hmm. And I always say, never be in denial. If your ankle is really in pain, don't deny it. Your ankle's in pain, and you may need to alter your lifestyle or something. Put up, whatever. But what you do is, here's the mindfulness piece. Just notice it. Mm-hmm. Just notice your ankle hurts. Don't go, oh my God, it still hurt. Is this ever going to go away? I'm so sick of this. Because that's the story. You just gave it a lot of importance, which means you just created more synapses in your brain.
Right.
I go, conversely, you may still have your pain, and it might still be happening in your ankle, but it's not always that bad. It's better sometimes than others, right? And so here's the part where everybody laughs at me. When you're having a better moment, go, oh my God, it's 1% better. This is amazing. And you're smiling, and everybody laughs at that. And I go, would you rather create a synapse around 1% better, or keep adding synapses to this doesn't work, this doesn't, da-da-da-da-da. So the importance thing, I always go the third thing like that. I just flipped the Taylor the bird because I go pinky, middle finger, bird. That's what I tell everybody. Mm-hmm. You are in charge of how important you make this.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a skill you'll have to learn because you've been taught when you stub your toe, oh my God, versus when your toe feels pretty good. Why would you pay attention to it? So that's one of the one things I do to everybody that I think if they get it has impact across their world.
I have no doubt. You shared that with me when I came into your office at some point, and I definitely got a lot from it. And I think the key of it is changing how we relate to the suffering. And That's where, to me, mindfulness always comes in of the mind is playing ping pong all day long about little things, medium things, and big things. And as soon as you realize you can actually choose to play or not, choose how you play, but most importantly, learn to observe the play and watch yourself. Mm-hmm. It's just a game changer. It's a game changer.
How do you, so observing myself doing anything, mm-hmm. I mean, there's all kinds of different names, super consciousness, awareness, whatever. How do you start teaching somebody to do that?
Yeah. So I like to do it in two different ways. One of which is I use an exercise that a couples therapist taught Brian and I, and it's called the SEW, the SEW.
Like sew, needle and thread.
Yeah, like needle and thread, exactly. So the S stands for somatic or sensation. So I ask people to identify 3 somatic sensations in your body. So like right now I would say my low back is tight, my legs are tired, my chest feels expansive, right? You don't attach any story. Well, my legs are tired. No. Because then as soon as you go into the story, you start leaving the sensation, right? Then the E is emotion. What are 3 emotions you feel? I feel energized right now. I feel excited and I feel hungry, which is physical and emotional. And then the W is a want. And the want could be something you want to tend to around the things you just named, like, oh, my legs are tight. I'm going to roll them out this afternoon because I had a really big week at hiking in the desert and at the gym, etc. Or it could be just a global want, like, I just really want to have a spacious afternoon because things have felt full. In that, then, for people who are new to awareness and new to mindfulness, I find that people often conflate meditation. To me, is a form of mindfulness. You can do mindfulness in all kinds of ways, and meditation is one of the ways. That I don't see it as emptying or quieting your mind. I see it as not participating with what's in your mind. So this is the same way I like to teach awareness in people's body and how to help them have embodiment and interoception, which is, okay, so now let's go back to one of the 3 sensations you listed. Which one's asking or giving you the attention the most? And often it's the first one we list because it caught our attention first. Okay, so let's say it's like my low back is tight. Okay, so now I want you to see if you can put your mind's eye, your attention, your breath, and your low back. And I don't want you to change anything. I want it to be exactly as it is. I don't want you to have an agenda. I just want you to actually learn to be present with it. Now, that in and of itself is really hard because, like you said, most people right away start with a story of, I don't like this, it's wrong, it's bad, I'm broken, we need to fix it, we need to get away with it. So part of it, what I do is then I'll walk them through, does it have containment to it? Is it more solid or is it more like gas or liquid? Then I might say, does it have a temperature? Is it porous? Is it inert and almost dead? Or does it have a movement quality to it? Does it have a smell? Does it have a taste? And what I find is as I walk people through this sensory experience, most people with just even a tiny bit of practice can start to put all of this felt experience into sensation and words for themselves. And then the last thing I'll often ask them is, now, how is that sensation willing to be sat with? Does it want to sit all the way on the front porch while you're upstairs in your room, because that's how close it'll let you? Or will it let you actually pull it right into your lap? How does it want to be sat with or breathed with? And then the very last question is, does it have anything to tell you, or do you have anything to tell it? And what I find is that's been the fastest way for me to help people. And I usually walk people through a mindfulness or meditation around this, but that's the way people can find embodiment. And the reason I think all of the sensories are so important and key is the example I use often is, you can read a book about sex or you can have sex. Do you experience those as different things? Most of us do.
Most of us.
Right?
Yep.
So to read a book about something is the conceptual, theoretical, in our head. And so when people come to see me, they often have that quote unquote all figured out. I know my parents love me. I know I'm good at my job. I know. But from the neck down, they don't feel it. They don't believe it. They don't know it. And they feel stuck as to what to do next. So being able to actually get in the body and helping people get embodied has been one of the most fun things for me personally and professionally in the last decade. And so helping people move towards sensation and becoming an observer rather than a participant, to actually notice all the edges and qualities and weight and shape and sound to it, helps it become relatable. And I think just like when we see, again, back to the sort of political world or the world we live in, when we see someone and we decide, oh, I saw the face of that thing and I don't like it, and I'm going to put it in that box. That's what we do with discomfort or pain. And so what I love about embodiment is this belief it all belongs. And if we can learn to relate to it and palpate it, there's a curiosity and a kindness that comes in being in relationship. And I think for me, that's one of the first places I try to help people understand and free themselves up from some of their suffering.
Well, that's cool. Thank you for so. And also, I just quickly caught, they don't have to participate in what they're thinking about something. Yeah. That's really fun to ponder.
Yeah.
And in my world, in some ways, people are already embodied, meaning they come to me because there's pain in their body. And so if anything, they're too embodied.
Well, but what I'd be curious about, and let's do a little informal study in your office of how they're actually attached to this. There's this physical thing happening we call pain, right? Sure. But then what we are also saying is, but then they've layered on 17 stories about it.
17.
And so they're almost not even...
You're being generous.
Yeah.
Like 50.
Yeah. They're almost not even in the pain anymore. They're in the story.
Very much so.
Because as we actually can meet the pain, so let's say we walked them through the meditation or the mindfulness practice I was just speaking of, what I find, and people will report to me, is I'll say, okay, you started off with, let's say like I did, low back tightness, and that you gave that a 9 out of 10. When we're done with that mindfulness, I'll have them rate it again, and they'll say, oh, that's weird. It's a 4 and nothing's changed.
Right.
Because of course what happens is as soon as I clamp down mentally, physically, psychologically on anything, most beings, including myself, do not like to be clamped down upon. And we don't react well, and we start to resist out. And so between the story, between the state we're creating, we can change our state if we can actually allow things. And so for me, learning to make relationship with, learning to let it all belong, helps take whatever stress or tension I'm trying to manage down significantly.
For all the neurology reasons we know, sympathetic, parasympathetic, blah 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 blah. You know.
And you talk about power, right? Like as someone who one of the things I came to you for was I have these sort of sporadic back spasms, I'll call them, and they are my worst pain. Well, they're up there with my migraines, but they're pretty painful for me. And it blew my mind when I realized, and I started doing this exercise with myself, that I could reduce the pressure, the intensity, the pain, the longevity of the back spasm by 50% plus.
I know, right?
And it's like, what? And yet, again, back to breathing costs nothing, pausing costs nothing, being mindful costs nothing. So what is it that makes all of us so resistant to slowing down, paying attention, having agency? This is such a powerful question. If we look at our culture, that to me, sometimes I look out the window and I feel like it's like a Mad Max movie come to life of people raging on 2 wheels with their hair on fire. And here you and I are like, annoying and so helpful to people both, because we'll say things like, you have agency, and there are simple, free tools we can give you. And I find people are simultaneously relieved, stunned, and then irritated because they have to do something. Like, what do you think is the resistance we have as humans to actually showing up and doing some of these things that will relieve our suffering?
What do I think is the why? I don't have a clue. And which, I'm not trying to skirt this. I'll come back to it, which makes me go to in my office, when a person their hair is on fire and they're on that motorcycle and they crash. Okay, we know why you broke your arm. And now we have to decide, why are you riding motorcycles with your hair on fire? But the majority of issues I see, and I think I would say most doctors would say this, I don't know. Where did this come from? Why did this happen? I don't know. To the point where I say so often in my office, I go, look, we will never know. What's the famous one? Oh, I slept funny last night. My neck hurts. Why'd you sleep funny last night? Oh. Sure. What a simple, easy, yeah, you slept funny. Oh my God, that would make my life so easy if I just bought into that. I got to think, that would make my life so easy. I could just say to every single person with neck pain,
you slept funny.
Just get a new pillow. Yeah, because you slept funny. It's your pillow. I mean, my God, that would be easy.
But see, you do know then, because now we're talking about the placebo effect versus beliefs in its role in belief system.
I love the placebo effect.
Totally.
It's awesome.
It is awesome for all of us, which is, again, imagine if you told all the people who came to see you who had neck pain, oh yeah, you slept funny. You need the XYZ pillow. And actually, let's make it the Kevin Reichland pillow, because then you can make money off it. It's the new merchandise.
Right.
And it has to have a white shirt at the top of it and jeans at the bottom for the pillowcase. If you don't know Kevin, he has a uniform, and it's so fun because you always can know he's coming. So like we sell him the Kevin Reichland pillow, and then you tell him, oh, it was just simply the pillow you slept on, and then they sleep great. Right. Last night I went to a graduation party for my goddaughter for a high school graduation, and met this guy who was a new spouse of a friend of mine, and he was talking about that they run a marijuana company in Denver, cannabis company, and his wife has been guinea pig testing all this stuff, and they were testing these sleep gummies, and did you like 1 or 2? And she loved 4, and everybody loved 4. Well, guess what? 4 was the placebo. There was nothing in it. And isn't it fascinating, this idea of our belief system, right? So is our belief system part of what's driving our attitudes, our behaviors, and everybody on fire? Like, I'm at this graduation party last night, and I'm watching the amount of people at 4 p.m. on a Saturday who are overserved 5 minutes into the party. And I'm like, why is everyone drinking so much and self-medicating so much and on fire so much and checked out so much?
All kinds of reasons, right?
Right.
Which brings me back to the why are people, what was your very first original question? I mean, well, just why, why aren't people doing what they know they should do? Why are people, they need to have an answer? Why are people and all that bit? And I am careful about not getting caught up in the why anymore.
Yeah. But
sure,
aren't you curious about it?
Yes, it's getting less.
Okay. Can I test one idea and see what you think about it?
Hold that thought.
Okay.
All right. So it's getting less because more and more and more, what I see is, number one, it's damn near impossible to come up with a singular cause anyways. So let's say I could be brilliant and tell somebody with any condition, whatever it might be, here's the 4 reasons why this is happening. I think I'd be lucky. And so maybe I could come up with the 4. But by the way, that's not what our culture wants. Our culture wants the 1. And,
you mean the pill?
Right? And so I think just increasingly after all these years, and by the way, this is why the 2 different chiropractic associations don't want to hear from me, because they want me to say it's because your spine's not functioning properly, or if you're a functional medicine doctor, it's because you've got mold, yeast, fungus, all of that bit. And all of that is a piece of the puzzle. But what else? And at a certain point, there is no why anymore, because it is utterly unknowable. So what do we do now? Let's go into what if the why isn't that important anymore?
I love that. I love that, because
it's
I
scary
think
for therapists, doctors, all that, because we're paid to know the why.
Yeah.
And what if it's kind of scam is way too heavy a word, but there's a disingenuous something in healthcare today. I don't know if you know this, but it was around 8 or 10 years ago, Johns Hopkins, certainly 8 or 10 years ago, is one of the gods of the cancer world. And they put out a statement that essentially said, I'm paraphrasing, we're putting too much time and effort into trying to figure out the cause of cancer. It's too complicated. Let's take that money and put it into how do we help people? How do we treat people? And as you can imagine, they got slaughtered. All the find the cure, ride for the cure, they said, how dare you? And that's like saying to God, you're wrong. And they retracted that statement. Ugh. And so, we want to know the why. And so the real fun question is why do we want to know the why?
Yes. Well, what I love about this is my 2 favorite words strung together are now what?
You've had children, don't you?
I do have children. Like in this place of why?
By the way, what's one of the annoying things kids say? Why?
Exactly.
Why? There's something sorry, just something clicked. I wanted to remember it.
It's that curiosity of the mind, but it's maybe the wrong question, for lack of a better way to put it, which is, as 30 years of being a therapist, as that comes to a close for me, one of the things I'm so struck by as you're talking is how often people say, why am I this way? And why did this happen? And why did that happen? And I find that actually, I often say to them, even if we knew, I think you would find it so much less satisfying than you're hoping it would be. And now what? Like, if we knew your mother said this, or your father didn't say this, or this happened, or that didn't happen, now what?
Oh, now what? Yeah,
right?
Totally.
And so it's like, we're here now. Life happens where your feet are. So what are we going to do now? Now what? I think that's so much more empowering, but I think there's a safety in hanging out in the why, because we don't have to get into action. We can just keep spinning on investigating the history. But my other question around the why is, I believe as humans, one of the simplest things we could be boiled down to, and we're not simple, so this is oversimplification, is we are wired to be pleasure seekers and discomfort avoiders. Okay. And so when we get stuck, stalled, or hung up on the why, I think there's either a pleasure we're getting out of it or we're avoiding the discomfort of going forward. So like in my office, a lot of people will say, I don't know, will be their response to something. And what I'll often say to them, I have a new idea, which is that they're going to push 400 pounds on the sled in my very long hallway of my suite. And when I teased a client about that this week and threatened her to push my imaginary sled, just the threat of it worked. She said, well, I actually do know, and it's this. So I find that's just equally interesting of how often we look for a why, and we either know it and don't want to name it because we don't want to have to take action, or we don't know it and we want to stay hung up on figuring out why are the Democrats behaving this way, because then we don't have to get into action with like, well, I don't know why, but this is how they're behaving. So now what do we do?
Because do you think that's conscious?
No, I don't.
Yeah, okay, good.
I don't think so at all.
Yeah.
But I think this is why, again, mindfulness and awareness is so key, because when people say to me they're stuck, I usually say, I have really bad news for you, but with no judgment, you're not stuck, you're just unwilling. Because sometimes our choices are death by lion and death by tiger. Now, I don't prefer either of those, but sometimes those are the choices I'm faced with. But if I stay hung up on the why, I don't have to make either of those choices. Right? Like if someone comes in and says, my spouse cheated on me, and what am I going to do? And why are we going to be done? And how are we going to do that? And I'm like, well, that's what happened. So I want you to feel that. And now I want to keep going. And they're like, no, I want to stay stuck and spin in this story. And then at some point they'll say, I am stuck. And I'll say, no, you're not stuck. You just don't like either option to go back in and have conversation and build trust and relationship and connection, or leave. And you don't prefer either of those choices, but those are the choices. So being stuck is a lot like focusing on, I need to know why. I can't move forward till I know why. And I'm like, well, that's interesting because the sun's still rising and setting and everybody else is still moving down the road. And you being stuck in this, I don't know why, is a really nice way to avoid stepping forward. But I don't think it's conscious, to your point.
Yeah, no, I totally, wow. I'm looking forward to listening to this podcast because you just said like 5 or 7 things and I am not trying to stay behind, and I want to go back and go, oh, she said this, or that. Okay. If nobody else listens to this, I'm going to listen.
Awesome. I will too. And we'll talk about it.
So in my world, a person messes up their knee from running too much. And so I can come up with whys, sometimes, I might say, one of my favorite things people will say, I ruined my knees running. And I said, you're missing a word. I say this with all due respect and all compassion. You're missing a word. What do you mean? I go, you're missing. And I try to get them to engage. I go, you wore out your knees running improperly. Running is not inherently bad. It's not, but you just wore them out improperly. And that's what we have to look at here. Yes, we can deal with your knee pain and all that bit. So, but even if you figure out the why, you still got to change something.
Well, that's why I say, I think, like you, there's places in my practice where somebody will come in and say, I don't know why I'm always in a codependent relationship, or I don't know why I seem to have this habit at work. I sometimes can help give them the why, but I find they still want to keep looking and they don't like it. And that the why doesn't always translate into something that they want to use that could be helpful.
Right.
That I usually say the why is just not that interesting most of the time.
Because back to the person who runs, older people, who runs incessantly and they wore out their knees. By the way, now they've come to see me and they say, but I swim 5 days a week now. And I'm like, you do know you're going to be in my office in 3 or 5 years and your shoulders are worn out. And then what are you going to do?
Well, and that's where I get so excited to work with people to say, like, let's look at the drone view. Like I find it fascinating. I got my hair cut sometime in the last 6 months, and across the way from my hairdresser is a Botox studio, clinic. I don't know what they call them, but a place that gives you Botox. And I didn't know really much about it. And my hairdresser said, oh, I did a trade. So she's telling me, every wrinkle you get an injection and it's $200-ish and you got to do it X amount of months. And she was kind of filling me in. So I'm kind of quickly doing the math of like, how much money the average person who I'm watching looks to be maybe 6 injections minimum is spending. And as I'm watching them come in, I'm watching them throw cigarettes down. I'm watching them be, excessively overweight. I'm watching them. Some of them look like they haven't slept in a month. And I'm thinking, isn't it interesting what we choose to focus on, right? There's this person like, why do I have wrinkles? I'm hydrating. I'm doing this and that. They're not even looking at some of the more obvious things. Right. So here in Boulder, I see so often, right, we have these athletes with repetitive injury. We have adults who have repetitive behaviors. Kids are so great. Like if you drive by a playground, I see like my most perfect visual of healthy movement, which is they're pushing, they're pulling, they're crawling,
which is what CrossFit was supposed to be all about, right?
Well, that's a whole
nother
podcast.
By the way, just for anybody who listens, I love CrossFit for 2 reasons. One, I love that diversity of pushing, pulling, I also love it because it keeps me busy.
Totally.
I mean, but because you take, kids aren't driven to do the monkey bars as fast as they can, right? They're
make up a game with it,
or whatever. They're not trying to achieve anything except have fun.
Yeah, have the experience.
Yeah. But anyways,
So I think again, the repetition I see of whether it's our thoughts, our behaviors, our exercise, and then we get worn out literally and figuratively from the repetition, and we blame the said event or the said thought rather than look at, I have some responsibility that maybe the repetition I put in and the difficulty I have in having the sense of harmony in my life because I just get myopically focused on one thing is where most of us can really fall into some serious holes.
Right. And all of that, why don't we look at this? Why don't we look at that? Why are we trying the shortcuts and all that bit? Believe me, there's a part of my mind that loves to, I could go down the path of, well, why are they like that? Is it their parents? Was it their, because that's interesting as hell to me. I love diagnosing. It's one of my favorite parts of being a doctor, and who was it? Cornfield who said first, something, then the laundry.
Oh, I think that's like a Zen Buddhist saying. I don't know who actually.
I think it was. I seem to recall it was for ecstasy, then the laundry, or something like that. I mean, yeah, we can figure it all. We can figure out the why. If we might actually get there, still got to do the laundry. So now what?
Yeah. I love it.
Exactly.
And I still sometimes think a lot of it comes down to we're doing the things we're doing to avoid discomfort or what we perceive to be uncomfortable, to seek pleasure, what we perceive to be pleasure, and that's where most of our suffering lies. And so this is a fascinating experience in these meat suits we're living in and this life that we get to walk through.
So I'm going to ask you the question while I ponder it because you're going to ask me the same question back. Out of 100% of your life, what percent is pleasure and what percent is discomfort? You're allowed to pause.
Yeah, I'm going to need to think about that. First, my stress comes up that I'm not great with numbers.
Okay, so that's discomfort.
Yeah.
So numbers. Okay, everybody, Taylor and numbers, discomfort.
Yes, totally. And anyone who knows me knows that.
Because I'm thinking the same thing, so I need the answer.
I guess like my sort of the fastest answer I have that feels accurate is it's probably equal.
Really?
I think about, I know how to work with discomfort and transmute it at this point.
Right.
And it started off as discomfort. And so it still counts I get annoyed at small things. It might last 2.2 seconds, but I still feel like this morning I couldn't get my coffee maker to work because one of my kids have been futzing with it. See? Exactly.
2.2 seconds, that's all? Be longer in my house.
What was great though is like I did this one setting and it fucked up there. Like I kept it was like 3 different iterations that weren't working. And I finally was like, well, damn it. And so I had 46 seconds total of this suffering. And then the great thing is I have an incredibly privileged and entitled life. So guess what? I figured out I got another coffee maker out and I made coffee and it was all fine. And that's why I'm here. I'm not unglued because even though I'm a decaf drinker, I drank my coffee. But I find that I am not less immune to life's irritations and discomforts, but what I am is so much more skilled of not getting hijacked, not hooking the noose around my neck or the leash and then yanking myself all over town with it. So I don't think I have any less discomfort, irritation, frustration, or annoyance than I ever had. But how quickly I recover is like Olympic speed compared to I could lose months. I probably lost months of my life early on in unfairness and, all the shit that I just didn't prefer.
Right.
But I don't know. That's a great question. I wonder if I should start paying attention. What would you say?
So I have two comments. Mine would be, same thing. When I was having my 45 minutes dark night of the soul, which I got to laugh about, but it was, even then I was watching myself do it. I was aware I'm on my bike and I'm just thinking all these horrible thoughts about how terrible I am and my life sucks and right. And, but having that part that's way up here going, just watching and just going, shift this. But actually it took effort to shift it.
Yeah.
But I just think about that. The other thing that makes that hard is, how much of my life is discomfort and how much is pleasure. I enjoy many discomfort moments.
I was always say you're crazy. I know. I love that about you. It's like one of my goals and aims. Yeah. Because I wouldn't say that like I feel that way. I think I don't feel mired in discomfort. I don't have any real suffering. But I feel discomfort so often. And to your point, I know how to shift it. I know how to be aware of it. I know what to do with it. And I still notice it.
Yeah. So I was trying to think, do I like discomfort? I like the results. And I know in that moment of discomfort that I will gain something from it. My 45 minutes dark night of the soul. Sorry, I'm having fun saying that. I actually knew that there would be some insights for me there, and there were. And another time. And so pretty much similar to that athlete mentality. If you want to go faster on a bike uphill, you got to do intervals that are just uncomfortable. And then you see the results, but you sure don't see them that day. You see them over time. And for me, over my life now, I just know in moments of discomfort that I'm going to gain something.
Well, that's totally true. But I guess another nuance I might add is I am much more comfortable with discomfort that I choose.
Oh, versus
the discomfort the universe decides to lay down for me.
Absolutely. Do you find you get over ones you choose faster?
Oh, definitely.
Shift? Yeah, I think so too.
Because I have to go through all the this is unfair and why me. And again, I can do it in record speed relative to earlier in my life, but I have a lot more resistance to the stuff that happens to me that I do not choose or saw coming or,
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally true. Yeah, I have discomfort. I'm going to say, because I didn't ask you, how do you do it? I just was purely discomfort versus pleasure. I'm going to say I probably either 60-40, 60 pleasure, 40 discomfort, or maybe even 75-25, something along those lines. So now what I'm kind of tickling in my brain right now is it wasn't always 75-25. I don't even know where it started. It was probably 50-50 for a long time. But I do find the 25 discomforts, they're more acute.
Interesting.
And I'm not sure if that's because I'm aware of them. And as soon as I feel discomfort, I'm so in that place of like, what do I want to do with this? Even, and 2.5 seconds to shift, not getting coffee in the morning. But your awareness is so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting even hearing you say you used to be 50-50, because I think when I was younger, even though I had a very fairly charmed life and that I didn't have any physical trauma, I didn't have a lot of familial trauma, I had a fairly steady upbringing, I would say I had 75% discomfort because I was so uncomfortable in my own skin. And every circumstance was an opportunity to be exposed or not get it right. I think I had a lot more discomfort than even 50%. So that's interesting. And the other thing I would say is discomfort to me also is 0 to 10, right? Like I would say a back spasm, I don't know if it's a 10, but it's pretty high up there. Whereas my coffee this morning was like a 1. Anything below a 3.
Which one which one has more impact? If you couldn't get coffee or if you had back
there was a
spasms?
period of time where
I'm sorry,
there was a period
it's
of time
too much
where
fun
I
to
had a
ask you.
friend who stopped drinking coffee, and I almost jumped across the table and choked her. And my husband was like, "You might have something to look at because she's not asking you to give up coffee, but you're just threatened by her giving it up."
Yeah.
And actually, around that time, I gave up caffeine, and it changed my whole relationship with coffee. So I don't have that thing with coffee anymore.
So it wasn't caffeine that it took 2.2 seconds to get over. It was not getting what you want.
Yeah, exactly. My habit. My little comfort, right?
Yeah.
And so in those moments now, what I find is like if it's like a 3 or below on the discomfort scale of that more irritation than discomfort, I just can find humor with it. Oh, this is funny. Yeah, you have this like really nice privileged life and you really would like a cup of coffee right now. And it's not working. Yeah. And the bigger stuff, I'm like, oh, this is and how I neutralize the biggest, most uncomfortable things. I think about like having a son who was suicidal at some point. I think about some of the darkest things I've experienced. That's where I usually pull in my practice. Like, this is not my preferred experience, which a lot of people roll their eyes at. But for me, it so quickly neutralizes that I don't get to choose my experiences for the most part. I get to choose what I do and how I feel about the experiences. And just calling it not my preferred experience takes out the personalization, takes out the overwhelm. And it says like all these experiences that happen a million times a day, that you don't prefer this, and you get to have a moment to not prefer this as many times as you need. And just in that, it's such a neutralizer for me. So I think that just always sort of helps get me back on the road.
I think that's teachable.
I do.
I think so too.
Yeah, I really do.
That's what you do.
That is exactly what I do. And I think, again, going back to just something even simple like the SO exercise, to learn to start to relate to yourself, not your thoughts, but to this vessel that we live in below the neck, I think is how we can start to let it all belong, tolerate, not have agenda, and start to have more neutrality of like, it's what's so, it's just what's so.
Right.
And it's interesting because even when I talk about, a couple of years ago, my husband said to me something about, oh, and you have this chronic pain. And I had this like very visceral response. I did not want to be the person or seen as the person who had chronic pain. And when I talk about my migraines and things to people, it's very interesting how whipped up I find people get about my migraines. I'm like, this is unfair. This is going on forever. And then they try to fix it. And we go through this whole cycle every time. And it's usually a projection of their own fear of like, holy shit, I don't want to get these migraines. And did you try this? Because this is what I would try and all the things.
Right.
And it's been such a nice practice for me to sort of feel like, and maybe it's the place you're saying, it's like, I wouldn't choose the migraines. If someone said to me, presto, magic wand, migraines gone, I would absolutely take that. And I also just feel like it's what's so, and I just feel really like it's not my preferred experience, and I do the things I feel like I can do to keep meeting myself, but I have such a softness around it that I find it fascinating how other people have so much inflammation and reaction to it. And I realize that's how I used to be about my own suffering or even the world. Like, what are we going to do about this war with the Palestinians? And I'd get all inflamed about XYZ thing of the moment. And now I just can hold like, oh yeah, there's this thing happening. It's not your preferred experience and it's okay. I think that's one of the most poignant, powerful things that has shifted my experience in being human. And so all I ever want to teach is what's helped me. And that's probably one of the biggest ones. And the pause where we started.
Totally true. Totally true. Oh my gosh.
Well, we could go on for days, as I'm sure you're wondering. Please, you two, stop talking.
Okay, what did we solve?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
know?
Well, okay, then, you would have to define solve.
Yeah.
So for me, just driving away, I will really appreciate so and pause. And there's just always so much that when you and I get together, I drive away and I'm like, first of all, I always smile because it's like, oh, she's a blast. She's so fun. And you are. Just saying, you're welcome. And but I just love exercising not just my mind. I love exercising all my capacities. I get to do my physical body on a bike, but so people ask me, because I've done my share of psychedelics, what are are there any commonalities? And one of the commonalities when I do a journey is a common thing is I feel my capacity my boundaries of everything being pushed open, pushed wider. And it's never comfortable. I'm always like, oh, even in that space, I'm like, oh, this is hard. I can actually sometimes tangibly feel my psyche going, just stretching wider. And I find conversations like this, it's not uncomfortable. It's quite playful and enjoyable, but I love the pondering afterwards. And I know my consciousness from this will expand a little bit, which is a really long way of saying thank you.
Well, I just want to flip that right back to you in this awesome paradox of, we've talked about how in the psychological realm, you have shared generously and vulnerably of that place of like, oh, I don't want to go there, but I'm willing. And I have felt that way physically. And I love how physically you're so able and willing to go there. And that was probably the first gift you ever gave me, both the first day I met you and in the time I've known you, is you have actually psychologically held my physical pain, your physical pain, the pain of others so gently and calmly and firmly. It's had such a good impact on my nervous system. And so I think what's fun is this paradox of, on one hand, you don't like to go there psychologically, but whenever we're together, that's exactly what we do. I don't like to go there physically, which you're good at. And every time we're together, we're somehow physically stretching as well. And so I think one of the things I'm hoping people who are listening will take away is this experience that when you come up against the discomfort in yourself or around the world, there are people and practices that can help not only neutralize it, but even transmute it into something beautiful and wonderful. And until we find a way to circumnavigate or shortcut all of that, I don't know any other way. And so I want to encourage everybody listening to find providers and friends and colleagues and practices that help you relate to your suffering differently, because until we, find a way to do that some other, I think Ozempic is the new thing that people are taking to reduce their suffering. Until we find a global way to do that, if that ever happens, so I think suffering is going to be an inherent part of this process.
Yeah.
And to have a sense of humor and to have buddies in it and to have practices are definitely the way through. So I'm really grateful to have you as, all of those things, as colleague and friend and someone to laugh with this insane experience called life.
It's a lot.
Yeah. And I think we'll have more of these conversations. So
I think so.
If you enjoyed it, you can find more about my organization and my work at Humanity Shared.
For me, it's my website, kevinreichland.com.
And in the meantime, take good care of you and your suffering. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.